Emma's eyes sparkled as she reached for the porcelain doll sitting on the corner of the garage sale table. Its dress was faded lace, yellowed at the edges, and its glass eyes gleamed unnaturally in the sunlight. She lifted it with both hands, whispering, "She's so pretty." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "It's just an old doll, Em. Don't look at it like it's magic." Laura glanced at the price tag, eyebrows raised. $1. That's cheap. Before she could question it, the elderly woman running the sale stepped forward quickly. Her voice trembled. "It belonged to my daughter. She never really let it go." The woman's eyes darted to the doll, then away, as if she couldn't bear its gaze. "Are you sure you want to sell it?" Laura asked, softly. The old woman hesitated, lips parting, then pressed them shut. "Take it, please." Emma clutched the doll to her chest, smiling as if she'd found a new friend. Mark shrugged, dropping the coin into the woman's hand. On the drive home, Emma held the doll in her lap, stroking its cracked porcelain cheek. Its painted smile seemed sharper in the shadows of the car. That night, Laura tucked Emma into bed. The doll sat propped against the pillow, its head tilted slightly as though listening. Emma kissed its forehead and whispered, "Good night." Hours later, the house was still. Moonlight spilled through the curtains. Laura stirred awake at the faint sound of laughter, high-pitched, childlike, drifting from Emma's room. She nudged Mark. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" he mumbled, rolling over. She held her breath. The laughter came again, soft and brief, like a secret joke shared in the dark. Without waiting, she slipped out of bed and crept down the hall. Emma's door was cracked open. Laura pushed it slowly, the hinges creaking. Inside, Emma was sound asleep, her small chest rising and falling steadily. The doll sat perfectly upright, its face turned toward the doorway, glass eyes glinting in the dim light. Laura shivered, glancing at her daughter. "Emma," she whispered. No response, just the quiet of the room. She let out a shaky breath and stepped back, convincing herself it was her imagination. Morning came gray and heavy. Laura entered Emma's room to wake her for school and froze. The doll was no longer propped neatly against the pillow. It was sitting at the very edge of the bed, its chin angled toward the door, as though it had been waiting for someone to walk in. Emma stirred and rubbed her eyes. "Morning, Mommy," she said sleepily. Laura forced a smile, her gaze locked on the doll. "Morning, sweetheart." But inside, her chest tightened. She could still hear that faint, lingering giggle echoing in her head. And Emma, before running off to wash up, leaned down and whispered to the doll, "Don't worry, I won't tell." The doll's glossy eyes seemed to glisten brighter in the morning light, as if it understood. The clock on the bedside table glowed 2:13 a.m. when Laura's eyes shot open. At first, she thought it was a dream, but then she heard it again. Soft, breathy giggles drifting down the hallway. They were faint, but sharp enough to crawl beneath her skin. She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. Mark stirred beside her, groggy. "Laura, what's wrong?" "Shh," she whispered, straining her ears. Another sound followed the giggles. A tiny voice, hushed and sing-song. "Play with me." Laura's heart lurched. She swung her legs off the bed and grabbed her robe. "It's coming from Emma's room," she whispered. Mark groaned, half asleep. "It's probably the TV, or she's talking in her sleep. Don't scare yourself." But Laura didn't wait for him. She padded down the hallway, floorboards creaking under her weight. Emma's door was slightly ajar, pale moonlight seeping through. Laura pushed it open, her breath held tight in her chest. Emma lay curled on her side, sound asleep, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. The doll sat propped neatly on the pillow beside her. Its head was tilted just enough that its eyes seemed fixed on Laura in the doorway. Laura's throat went dry. The voice she'd heard just seconds ago was gone, the room thick with silence. She stepped closer, her whisper trembling. "Emma, sweetheart, are you awake?" Emma stirred faintly, mumbling something incoherent before drifting back into deep sleep. Laura's gaze snapped back to the doll, its painted lips curved in that same fixed smile. But in the silvery moonlight, it almost seemed wider. She forced a laugh under her breath, whispering, "It's just a toy, just porcelain and paint." The floor creaked behind her. She spun around. No one. Just the shadows in the hallway, stretching long and thin. She backed away slowly, the doll still in her peripheral vision. By the time she crawled back into bed, her skin was damp with cold sweat. Mark blinked up at her, still half asleep. "Well," he muttered. "There was a voice," Laura whispered, "right there in the room. I heard it, Mark." He rubbed his face. "It's late. You're exhausted. Houses make noises. Kids mumble in their sleep. Don't let Emma hear you talking like this, okay? She'll start believing it." Laura wanted to argue, but her chest felt tight, her throat locked. She lay awake the rest of the night, ears straining for even the faintest sound. When morning light spilled into Emma's room, Laura forced herself to walk in. Emma was already awake, brushing her doll's hair with a tiny plastic comb. "Morning, Mommy," Emma beamed. Laura's eyes flicked to the doll and froze. The night before, she was certain she had seen it sitting upright, facing her in the doorway. Now it sat on the pillow again, but its head was turned sharply toward the bedroom door, as though it had been left like that, waiting. Her stomach sank. She hadn't touched it. Mark hadn't. Emma smiled and kissed the doll's porcelain cheek. "She said she wants to play again tonight." Laura's blood ran cold. A scream ripped through the silence of the night. Laura bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a moment, she thought it was part of a dream, until Emma's voice cut through again, raw and terrified. "Mommy, Daddy." She and Mark scrambled from the room, rushing down the hallway. Emma's bedroom door slammed against the wall as Laura shoved it open. Emma was sitting upright on her bed, her little hands trembling as she pointed toward the floor. The porcelain doll lay there on the carpet, arms stretched forward, as though it had been reaching for her. "She was on my bed," Emma sobbed, clutching her blanket. "She was talking to me." Mark bent down, scooping up the doll with a forced laugh. "Emma, you had a bad dream, that's all. Dolls don't talk." "No!" Emma screamed, voice breaking. "She was sitting here, right here. She said she wanted to sleep next to me." Laura knelt at the edge of the bed, pulling Emma into her arms. The child was trembling, her breath shallow. Laura's eyes darted to the doll, dangling from Mark's hand. Its glossy eyes seemed to catch the light, staring back at her, unblinking. "Mark," Laura whispered, her voice sharp. "That thing didn't just fall off the bed like that. Look at it. Look at where it landed." Mark sighed heavily. "Laura, you're letting this get in your head. Emma had a nightmare. That's it. You can't scare her more by treating this like it's real." Emma clutched at Laura's sleeve, whispering frantically. "She touched me. I felt her hand on my arm. Laura pulled back Emma's sleeve. Tiny red scratches trailed across her forearm, as if made by fingernails. Her stomach dropped. Mark froze, staring at the marks. She could have done that herself. Kids scratch in their sleep all the time. But his voice lacked conviction. Laura shook her head slowly, cradling Emma tighter. These aren't from sleep, Mark. Look at the shape. The room felt cold, heavier, as though the air itself was listening. Later that night, after finally calming Emma, Laura insisted on leaving the doll outside the bedroom. She placed it on a shelf in the living room, far from her daughter's bed. Mark didn't argue, but his silence was uneasy. When Laura returned to the hallway, she stopped dead. From Emma's room, where the curtains swayed faintly with the night breeze, she saw it, the doll's head. It turned, slowly, unnaturally, until its glossy eyes were staring straight through the cracked door at her. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She gripped the doorframe, paralyzed. Emma stirred in her bed, mumbling in her sleep. The doll remained still now, face frozen, but Laura knew she hadn't imagined it. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed darker than before, stretching long fingers across the floor. And in the hush of the night, Laura felt the undeniable certainty sink into her bones. They weren't just living with a doll, they were living with something inside it. Mark's hands trembled as he adjusted the small CCTV camera onto Emma's dresser. The little red light blinked on, casting an eerie glow across the room. Emma sat on her bed, hugging her knees, her eyes darting between the doll on the pillow and her father. "She won't like it," Emma whispered. Mark forced a smile, brushing her hair back. "Sweetheart, this will show us there's nothing to be afraid of." "Okay, just a toy." Laura stood by the doorway, arms crossed tight against her chest. Her gaze locked on the doll. It sat there, still and silent, but the weight of its glass eyes pressed against her like a hand on her throat. That night, the three of them crowded around the laptop in the living room, watching the feed. The house was dark. The only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Midnight crept into 1 a.m., then 2. Emma slept soundly, the doll propped by her side. At exactly 3:07, the doll's head shifted, just slightly, a tilt toward the camera. Laura's hand flew to her mouth. "Mark, did you see that?" Mark leaned forward, his face pale. It's nothing, just the angle." On the screen, the doll's head turned more, deliberate, slow. Its glassy eyes stared straight into the lens. The faintest creak of porcelain echoed through the speakers. Emma stirred in her bed. In the microphone, a whisper hissed, "Don't watch me." The doll's lips parted, and then, impossibly, they curled into a smile. Thin porcelain cracked at the corners, revealing the faint outline of tiny teeth beneath. Emma bolted upright in bed, screaming, "Turn it off! She sees you!" The screen fizzled, static roaring, the feed shaking violently, as though the camera itself were being rattled. Then, in the chaos, a final image burned through the static. The doll no longer on the pillow, no longer in sight, until it appeared closer, right before the lens, filling the frame with its twisted smile. The feed cut to black. Laura screamed, racing down the hall. She burst into Emma's room. The bed was empty, sheets thrown aside, the curtains whipping from an open window. "Emma!" Mark stumbled in after her, frantic, searching every corner. The doll was gone. No trace of it on the floor, no trace on the bed. Just silence. Then, from the laptop still humming in the living room, the static cleared. A new feed flickered to life. Emma sat in the corner of her room, knees drawn to her chest, the doll nestled in her lap. Her eyes were wide, pupils swallowed by black. The camera zoomed, though no one touched it. The doll leaned closer to the lens, pressing its face against the screen. "Mine," it whispered. The feed went dark, and in the hollow silence that followed, the only sound left in the house was faint, high-pitched laughter, drifting endlessly through the walls.